Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal, Bigfoot. We've got two all-new Dogman stories for you today that aren't just scary. They may challenge your entire worldview. But first, I'm excited to announce that today's executive producer is none other than Travis Turner. Travis is a real page turner. He's no book burner. He's a learner. At the end, all I truly have is to say thank you to this Travis. Thanks, Travis Turner, the book learner. Without your help, we'd be concerned. If you'd like to become an all-star Scary Stories executive producer like Travis Turner, just join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com or click that join button under this here video. Either way, after I wake up, I'll send you over 9 hours of scary, uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else on the planet. But mainly, we hope you join so that we can afford to continue the show. And speaking of continuing the show, let's jump into our first story right now. It's a tale of the Wisconsin werewolf, which is really assumed to be a dogman. It's another story from the northern part of Wisconsin, which, along with the northern half of Michigan, accounts for a lot of the email reports we get from you guys. This one's pretty creepy, and we call it The Werewolf of Wausau. Dear Scary Stories NYC. In Wausau, Wisconsin, there is a nice little park called the Sylvan Hill Park. It's got motorbiking. In the winter, it's supposed to have snowboarding, although I've only been there in the summer. I have no idea if it's open right now or not. Anyway, my first serious girlfriend was into camping, and she and I used to sneak off and camp in the woods next to the park, unless they were actually a part of the park, I'm not sure. I know we would go to the park with our camping backpacks on, have a picnic there, then head off into the trees to find a place to set up our tent before nightfall. Understandably, I usually become nostalgic when I think back on that time. Except, of course, for the night in which we had to deal with the Werewolf of Wausau. I guess the first thing I should explain is that this particular girlfriend was very playful, at least with me. Let's call her Dana, because this was when the X-Files was popular, and she had her red hair cut to look like Dana Scully from the show. She wasn't serious like the TV character, though, as I'd already indicated. One of the things Dana liked to do was play hide and seek in the forest. Now, I never liked that game in that context because anything can happen out there. I felt like one should respect the woods a little bit more than that. Do you really want to be hiding in a dark spot in the wilderness that you hope your partner won't find you in? Is that really an act born of wisdom? But Dana would call for formal hide-and-seek games sometimes, and other times would just hide from me unannounced. In the end, each time she would be joyous, laughing at how sad I looked when I thought she was lost, or worse. I would be a nervous wreck, having already gone through the 5 stages of grief before she would pop out shouting boo and laughing. It was so funny to her. Life was just a game. At least until the night that this story is about. On that night, we were telling spooky stories and trying to out-scare each other. We didn't set a fire, as we would just bring dried food and nuts with us along with water. We never stayed more than one night, and we never cooked anything, not even marshmallows. We did have a battery-powered light with us that was built to look like an old flame-lit lantern. It had multiple brightness settings, sort of in the same way that people would be able to turn the gas or fuel up or down to make the flame brighter or dimmer back in the day. After finishing a scary story that really creeped me out, Dana popped up, and announced that she had to go to the woods to do some private business. I was surprised when she trotted off into the woods without the lantern or one of the other flashlights that we usually packed with us. She just ran off into the dark woods, which is not something that a sensible person would do, and not something I had seen her do at night before. Of course, Dana being the playful person that she was, I couldn't be certain that this wasn't some new trick she had planned to scare me all over again. I stood up, watching her run into the darkness and out of my sight. I thought that I should probably follow her with the lantern, but if she really was doing her private business, then that would be a very rude thing to do. I wasn't sure whether I should err on the side of her safety or on the side of being polite. After all, the woods had been quiet and we hadn't heard anyone walking around our camp. We were in Wisconsin, not Alaska. I kept telling myself that I was just being paranoid. I hadn't heard anything, including Dana, for over a minute. At least I counted to 60 in my head and hadn't heard anything in those trees move at all. I began to wonder if there were some sort of natural sound barrier that prevented me from hearing what was going on over there. Maybe those woods just happened to grow in a certain way so that they acoustically held their sounds within them. I have no idea if that makes any sense in science or the real world, but that's what I was thinking. I was also thinking that it wouldn't be rude if I walked toward the woods to meet Dana halfway on her walk back to the tent, assuming she ever emerged from those woods again. When I got through the tall grass to a little more than halfway between the tree line and our tent, I could once again hear the sounds of the forest. I don't know if that validates my theory about a sound wall, or if I just needed to get closer to hear the woods, but each step I took brought more sound to my ears. I could see things moving around in there as well, briefly illuminated by the lantern. My heart clenched in my chest. Dana had walked into those woods in the dark. There would have been no way she could have seen that there were things moving in there. Panicking, I almost called Dana's real name, but it caught in my throat. I didn't know who or what else was out there. I didn't know what response I would get. Instead, I walked tentatively closer to the woods, holding the lantern out as far in front of me as I could imagine. I wished I could be Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four and stretch that lantern out 30 or 40 feet in front of me. I wanted to look in those woods, but I didn't want to be in those woods. I had to decide how much longer I was going to be polite and wait, and what exactly I was going to do when I stopped being polite and went in after her. I remember feeling pretty annoyed at Dana in that moment. Not enough to break up with her, but enough that I felt like I was going to pass out from the constant stress she was always putting me through. I eventually, after hearing nothing from her for quite some time, felt I had no other option other than to progress slowly, cautiously, forward toward the underbrush. I remembered the advice that my friend on our school's baseball team had told me that the coach told him. Prepare to hit the fastball, but get ready to swing later if it turns out to be the changeup or the curve. So I thought I should head into those woods ready to run back to camp for the slightest reason. If I didn't see anything dangerous, though, I would go ahead and take another step, and another step deeper. I contented myself with the idea that, if I was about to make myself a goner, I was at least doing it logically. I managed to slowly progress in this manner for what felt like 7 years, but was probably more like 45 seconds or a minute. I wanted to call out for Dana, but I remained too chicken to actually do it. Silently, I poked my head past a bush to my right, and there, just behind the foliage, was Dana. My split second of relief seeing her alive was cut short, as her eyes looked up at me in panic, and I could see on her cheeks that she'd been crying. Fear shot through me as I knew this was not one of her pranks or jokes. This was something very uncool that was happening. Her eyes did not look relieved to see me, and she returned to looking past me in fear. Before I could turn around, I smelled it. The odor of a very large mammal. And then I heard it. The annoyed, low-pitched, guttural growling of the same. I turned around expecting to see a bear, but instead I was met by the terrible dog breath of a 7-foot-tall, upright-standing canine-type animal. It may as well have been a bear. It was probably taller than one of them. Let's just say it was easily as scary as coming face to face with a bear, and apparently it had been scaring my girlfriend all this time. This beast had longish, wavy, silver to black colored hair hanging all over his body, with much shorter hair on his face colored similarly but a little darker. The eyes were intense and glowing brightly, a slightly yellowish but mainly white glow. I remember an attitude of hostility and agitation as it panted, in between growling and whining. I averted my eyes from its face and stared for a while at this thing's claws. These were monster hands, like from the movies. These were not the paws or claws of an animal. These were full-on hands, ending in long, razor-sharp-looking talons. His claws had to be 2 inches long, maybe longer. This was not an animal. This was a monster. It was something that walked out of a horror movie. It didn't belong there as far as I was concerned. But we didn't belong there as far as it was concerned. I have told people the next part of this story as though I were a very brave man doing a very brave thing. In fact, I just sort of flipped out and figured I had a brief window of time where, if I did something crazy, like super crazy, it might buy us some time. I probably got the idea from a stupid Buddy picture or a Three Stooges film or something. It wasn't so much a moment of bravery as a moment of insanity. So, what did I do? What I did was I stomped my foot and I started screaming at the Dogman to back off. I didn't say it as nicely as that. I threw a tirade and cursed him out, to be honest. And he actually backed up a step. I turned to Dana and I told her to run. She just looked at me. I said, "Run!" Then I ran, leaving her there. I had no other choice. I wouldn't have been able to grab her and carry her or drag her. The Dogman barked viciously and loudly. It was short, hard barks, and Dana was screaming louder with each one. But I could hear that she was catching up to me, that she had gotten up, and that she was running after. We zipped ourselves up in our tent, but I don't think the Dogman actually ever left the woods. If it did, we didn't hear it, because of the strange way the sound seemed to be over there on that night. We pretty much held each other and shivered for the next few hours. She had gotten so shocked that she felt ice cold for some time after I got her into our oversized sleeping bag. She and I didn't continue going out for too long after that. She couldn't be as playful around me anymore for some reason. Those kinds of events either bring you closer or drive you apart, and this one, for whatever reason, did not bring us closer together. I think she identified me with the loss of her happy, playful period in her life. I was the one who was there when she discovered that the world is a mix of friendly and unfriendly. It's not all romper room. There is also danger, which she was introduced to in the form of the Werewolf of Wausau, the Denmark Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I had a very strange Dogman encounter or two in Denmark back in 2015. Of course, I don't mean Denmark in Europe. I mean Denmark, South Carolina. I had spent the day celebrating with my friend we can call Max. He had been my best friend since kindergarten. People used to call us brothers. My fiancée was returning to town the following day to start planning our wedding, and I had just cut a very lucrative deal for my personal business. Things were looking good all day as the sun shone overhead, but as we drove back home at night through Denmark, we encountered something that would, figuratively speaking, alter the color temperature of the rest of our lives. So, we were driving on Heritage Highway US 78, or I should say I was driving and Max was riding shotgun. We both had very different accounts of what happened, and I will try to present both sides as accurately as I can remember. I would ask Max to tell his side, but he stopped speaking to me because of who I voted for in 2016. Up ahead on the highway, we were going to have to make a right turn onto College Road. Before the right turn, there's a clear cut of trees and vegetation on an angle so that you can see the road you're turning onto. And there, in all his glory, standing and walking in the clearing just like a character from a movie, was a 7 or 8 foot tall werewolf type creature. I remember laughing out loud, but Max was extra frightened, really spooked by it. I thought it was a joke at first, to be honest. The way its eyes lit up seemed artificial to me, like a mask with Christmas lights stuck in the eye sockets. I remember slowing down to stare across Max and out his window at that thing, which was just ambling on toward us, but not in any particular hurry. It looked like the big bad wolf, with big old pointy ears on top and a mean old scowl on his long wolfish face. He stood up, like a man in a suit, which is exactly what I thought he was. I mean, if you ever look at animals trying to walk like humans, you either see them trying to stand as straight as possible so that they don't fall over, like bears or dogs, or else you see them all bent and so forth like the occasional walking gorilla. This creature just stood like a normal human. It walked like one of us. So, logic dictates that it must have been a human in a costume, right? Okay, well, here's where my story gets weird and complicated. This is also where my ex-friend Max and I begin to differ in our retelling of the story. In my memory, everything happened as I told you up to this point, with me driving forward very slowly, looking out the right front window of the car. In the next instant, or really in the next part of that same instant, I was driving faster again. I was facing forward. I was further back on the highway again. My friend Max was shouting at me to watch out. I wondered what he was talking about when I saw it. The Dogman, running out onto the highway directly in front of the car. I hit the brakes and screamed, and so did Max. I closed my eyes when I saw that I could not avoid hitting the creature. There was no sensation of impact. I brought the car to a halt and jumped out, looking all over the road behind me. There was nothing there. I hadn't hit anything. I looked under my car, but there was nothing there either. I asked Max if he had seen where it went, and he was so stunned. It took him a while to figure out how to put it into words. He said that the Dogman saw us about to hit him, and he transformed his energy into various kinds that wouldn't mind being hit by my car. I asked Max what the heck he meant by that, and he said the Dogman became light and air, and then we drove through it. He told me the story over and over back then, soon after it happened, with me constantly asking him more questions. I think the short version is that the creature sort of turned into an orb. At least that's sort of what the imagery sounded like he was describing. I didn't see any of that, though, so I can only tell you what I've already told you. I asked Max back then if he had the strange time stutter that I experienced, and he didn't understand what I was asking him. In his experience, he saw the Dogman emerging from the woods and walking onto the highway before we got to the clear-cut diagonal at the right turn. He never experienced that, or at least if he did, he's forgotten it. Maybe I wasn't supposed to remember the first version either. I have memories of both realities still. Nothing like that ever happened to me before or since, and I have no explanation for it even now. I didn't know something like that could even happen. Apparently, there is some crossover between video games and real life. I think I got to see two versions of the same cutscene or something. People assume that because of my experience, I must now believe in Dogman. Since I don't know what I saw, and I don't understand the meaning of it either, I continue to reserve judgment about all aspects of the experience. Yes, I saw a Dogman, but I saw it in a context, or maybe I should say I saw it in two contexts, that caused me to wonder if what seemed to be happening was what was actually happening. I did not personally see it transform into light energy, but I know my car didn't hit anything when the Dogman should have been under my wheels. If it didn't evaporate, it had to have done something extreme to get away. Unless it was never there. Unless it was just an image or an idea stuck in the heads of me and Max. Unless it was some very advanced form of holography or illusion, and we were just random test subjects who happened to drive down the road at the right time, on the right day, for them to run some holography or something on us. That wouldn't explain the scene partially restarting in the middle, though, and it wouldn't explain how we ended up moving backward on the road to our earlier location. Like I said, no matter how much I think about it, I really have no clear explanation for the Denmark Dogman. And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.